that I have no objection against anybody calling anybody non-Muslim, considering him to be non-Muslim. Because if I take that right from him or her, it would be interfering with his fundamental human right. If somebody is brought up in a manner of religious training where he thinks that there are certain fundamentals to that religion, which if missing in another person, a follower of another sect, would give him the message that because that fundamental is not present in his concept of Allah and Rasul, so he cannot be genuinely defined as Muslim. Can it happen or not? It can happen genuinely. So how can one take the right away from everybody, that even if he considers somebody to be not genuine Muslim, he should, for the sake of unity, go on calling him a genuine Muslim? It's not right. The objectionable point is a completely different thing from this. If you consider somebody to be a Muslim, you have a right to consider him as non-Muslim, but you have no right to force him to call himself a non-Muslim. Because the same principle of fundamental human right would be violated then. Christians have been calling others as non-Christians, but they have never in history snatched the right from each other to still continue to call themselves Christians. What is happening in Pakistan is the most distorted thing in religious history. They consider us to be non-Muslims, Ahmadis, while they have been considering each other non-Muslims for last 1300 years, at least 100 years after, even before Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, closer to him than 1300 years. There are sects in Islam who have been considering others as not Muslims. But as such, they continue to disagree with each other. Never they imposed this compulsion on any sect they considered non-Muslim as not to behave like a Muslim, not to act as a Muslim, not to call themselves as Muslims, and not to do anything by way of Muslim worship which would make them appear like Muslims. This never happened in any religion in the world before, and even in Islam before the time of these recent decisions of government of Pakistan vis-a-vis Ahmadiyya. No, what they are doing is this: we are a majority, a political majority, and democratically we have a right to vote you down, to consider you anything, and this is a democratic right of the people. So it's not a question of interference in religion. This is a question only an exercise of a democratic right. This is what the ambassador of Pakistan here wrote in answer to a letter of protest by a British MP as to why these things are happening to Ahmadiyyat, and the same answer was given in Canada and in other places of the world. So it was a well, tailored answer supplied to all the ambassadors. But if you study it further, there is no, iota of wisdom in that answer. The fact is that, first of all, democracy is democracy and religion is religion, and never the twain shall meet. And when they do, they create disorder. This is supported by the world history. As long as they remain separate, there is peace. When religion and democracy or politics join hands, they create havoc for the peace of mankind. Because the politician can, of course, be cruel to their own people, but in their own name. But when cruelties are perpetrated against others in the name of God, then human beings begin to play God, and they have the support of a political system behind them. Then what happens? A Khomeini is born, a Zia is born, and Inquisition begins to take root in Spain and so on and so forth. This is a murderous mistake. And in this respect, politics must be kept aloof and separate from religious domain, and they should not interfere with each other. Secondly, you see anybody to be something. For instance, they have declared us to be non-Muslims. Okay. Can a democracy declare somebody to be a dog? A human being to be a dog? They say, yes, why not? We have a right, we have a majority. All right, you declare a human being to be a dog, but can democracy force that human dog to bark? How can they teach that human being to act like a dog and behave like a dog, and the moment they start, that human being behaves like a human being, he is penalized, he is punished, because he has broken the law, democratic law. Is there any wisdom in that? This is exactly what is taking place against Ahmadiyya. They say we have a human right, a democratic right, to consider yourself to be outside the pale of Islam. We say, yet we have that same democratic right to consider ourselves to be within the pale of Islam. So that is the stalemate. No more. You call us non-Muslims, we call ourselves Muslims, that's all. When you declare something against a minority political party, you cannot force that political party to agree with you and start acting like you believe they are. Only that democratic majority has a right to legislate as they please, but they cannot change the nature of the political parties who are in opposition. For instance, if there is, consider a Labour Party for instance, and there is a majority government of conservatives. If they declare that we democratically think that you are not Labour, you are a communist party, what can that poor minority do in a democratic state? They say, all right, do whatever you please, but this is nonsense. They say, no, it's not just nonsense. We are going to legislate now that if any member of Labour Party acts like a member of Labour Party from now on, he will be punishable to 3 years rigorous imprisonment. From now on, because we consider him to be a member of Communist Party, every member of the Labour Party must start acting as a communist. Can this happen in democracy? This is what is happening in the so-called Pakistani democracy. They declare Ahmadis to be non-Muslims and they want us to act as non-Muslims. We say that will not happen. Do whatever you may. You can call us dogs, whatever name you give us. All right, we'll tolerate that. But if you expect us to behave like you think we are, that's not going to happen. This is the problem which is now being dealt forcibly by the enforcement of laws and penal codes, etc., against Ahmadis. Thousands of Ahmadis are facing charges which may lead to their imprisonment to 3 years, rigorous imprisonment or more, or may lead to their condemnation to death, because the law now interprets the legislation against Ahmadis in the sense that if an Ahmadi declares La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, which means there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, according to the the Chief Justice of High Court of Pakistan, if an Ahmadi says that, it must be taken as an insult to the Holy Prophet of Islam. And as such, he must be condemned to death. These statements are published statements, they are public knowledge now. No country in the West raised their little finger against this. But when the death penalty hung over 2 Christian boys, then the entire world conscience was aroused. And right from Europe to America to Canada, the publicity was given to this, and they said, they immediately, offered them moved from their country under influence, American influence, etc. And they're still at it. The 2 boys, Christian boys, against whom the same law created the threat of death, they have been noticed by the West, but Ahmadis who are treated in large numbers like this, they are completely ignored. So that is the unfortunate situation in the world. But I think I have spoken enough on this issue. Is the question answered? Or is there something left of that which I forgot?
There is one tone in the question which says that how would ordinary people who do not agree with them, how should they react in Pakistan to these laws?
Nobody can react against the law, particularly if they are living under the awe of the mullah or the fear of the mullah. Their feeling is immaterial because it is not expressed. What is expressed always, the agreement with mullah. And if particularly the politician cannot dare confront the mullah on this issue because he is afraid of losing their favor and a few votes maybe who are under the influence of the mullah as well. But the intellectuals are now rising. They are awakening to the situation and they are appearing certain articles in some magazines, some newspapers, in which some intellectuals very strongly condemn this attitude of the government and the political organizations. But they have a lonely voice, unfortunately, ineffective voice. Thank you.
The next question is that why is there so much hatred between Sikhs and Muslims when in God's eyes everybody is one? And this is from Baljit Son.
I don't agree with the question. There is no hatred among them between the Muslims and Sikhs at all. Occasionally, sometimes some people with ulterior motives stir up things only for a little while, and sometimes the misbehavior of untrained youth results in some small explosions, like it happened in Southall, was it, or somewhere else? Yes, recently, yes. No, that was the fault of those Muslim youngsters who were celebrating some day for themselves, and without any rhyme or reason they started mocking at Sikhs and even cracking jokes against some Sikh ladies who were passers by. That infuriated, and rightly so, the Sikh community, but their expression of their displeasure was rather not fully recognized as genuine by the law. So some Sikhs were arrested for that. But as far as the genuine cause is concerned, I believe that there was a genuine cause for their displeasure and anger, and tempers ran really high at that time. Fortunately, it did not end up in a very serious clash. Minor injuries were suffered, of course, but we should avoid these things. Immediately, Muslim leadership should have joined heads and hands with the Sikh leadership. It should have been avoided, could be avoided in fact. There is no hatred between Muslims and Sikhs at all. Politically, in history sometimes, there was a cause of friction between the then Mughal Muslim government and the Sikhs of the Punjab. But that is a part of the history. Aurangzeb particularly, is blemished or maligned by the Sikh scholars for treating their gurus mercilessly and cruelly. First of all, there are many exaggerations in their accounts, and some Sikh scholars themselves have written, you know, critically of such other Sikh scholars who exaggerate the facts of cruelties of the Muslim monarchy of India against the Sikhs of the time. But there are other Sikhs who generally, you know, from time to time want to raise up the same issue. They like stir and sort of excitement, even at the cost of peace. So recently it happened, not recently, but a few years ago it happened in Canada, where in the higher body of Sikh, I don't know what name they give it, but it was a sort of consultative body. In that consultative body, it was mentioned that, you know, remember what this Aurangzeb did to our gurus? And it will be a shame on our part if we forget that part of history. We must bring it to light from time to time and let our new generations know where they should stand vis-a-vis their relation to Sikhism and so on. It was a very, you know, motivated speech and stirring speech. But a Sikh wise man stood up and he completely diffused the whole issue. In fact, the tempers were suddenly transformed to a situation of laughter. He said, look here, what are you talking about? Who are you talking about? You're talking about Aurangzeb, the one who gouged the eyes of his own brother and imprisoned his own father. So if that was the emperor who did it to his own father and brother, what would you expect of him in relation to your gurus? What was they to him? You know? Suddenly, you know, everybody started viewing the same thing from this perspective. It was an individual person as a king who had his own very severe attitude to certain types of disciplines, who would not spare his own father, who would not spare his own brothers. So such a man should not be held responsible beyond his own personal domain. His religion should not be tarnished because of his act. So that wise man among the Sikhs at that time, you know, he completely diffused the issue and everybody started laughing and the matter was over. So I tell you, genuinely the Sikhs are quite close to Muslims. During my students' days, I remember I had far more Sikh students as friends than others, because the Sikhs are a simple community, open-hearted. There are no twists in them. Only the problem is that when they are rash, they can be very rash. Once they are angry, you know, then they know no laws to discipline them. So don't go to you know, don't exceed that boundary of their limitations. And then you're safe. They're very good friends, and lasting friends, and genuine and open people. Okay?
So the next question has been submitted by Mrs. Tharani. She says, following up on Huzur's reply to the question on morality and evils of today's society, especially gay tendencies, could he please advise, enlighten the women how to recognize the rise or advent of such tendencies in our children? Is it an environmental, medical, biological problem? How are we to solve or tackle this problem? If it is indeed a biological malfunction, what can we do to correct it? I ask this as it is often the mothers and sisters who are the closest in contact with the children and adolescents and would be the first to recognize these symptoms, and hopefully also the most important ones in bringing about a change should such an unfortunate occurrence happen.
You see, my answer is a simple answer. First of all, I do not agree with the complexities of the issue as they have been presented. There are no social, biological, and other environmental or genetic involvements in the issue at all. It's a simple issue of the attitudes of a generation towards the younger generation, which they create and leave behind them. There are always points where two generations meet and separate. These lines must be the focal points of our attention. If we let generation gaps to appear between one generation and the other, then we have already lost the battle of continuing or trying to continue the good traditions of the older generation into the next one. Because these gaps are never jumped. Once the gaps are created, they're created, and then your own offspring and progeny seem to drift away from you, and you have no control over that, because the rest of the society is gravitating them away from your values. So the best policy, the best advice I can render is that the parents must be mindful of the fact that they should cultivate a sort of relationship with their children whereby they find in their parents and elders the best friends they can think of. They must turn to them with full trust in all issues of decision making. They must be provided some player in the house, in the family, where they would look with hope, and they would be looking forward to returning to the peace of their homes and enjoy the closeness of the family links and pleasure and mutual trust and simple, healthy pursuits of pleasure. If this is promoted, then they will not be gravitated to the streets and to the outside home activities over which the parents can have no control. So build an inward gravitational pull whereby the home becomes the returning point of the father, of the mother, of the sisters, of the brothers, and it does not become only a resting point like a motel or a hotel. The major problem, the devastating problem of the present society is that the homes are now gradually being more and more treated as just a compulsion to return to, where you have deposited your things, you must return, you can eat quickly, easily and cheaply, and return to the points of attraction which lie outside your home activities. When this happens, then how can you have any command over your children, over your husbands either, over your wives if you're husbands? The society gets disintegrated at homes, and the society which is disintegrated at homes can never be integrated outside. It's a fool's dream, no more. So build the homes as points of attraction, a healthy point of provision of pleasure, and most of the problems of the society will melt into thin air, inshallah. Thank you.
Huzur, there are two questions on this paper and they are in Urdu.
Okay. You read the Urdu or translation as you please.
I'll read the Urdu.
Okay.
कुरान का लफ्जी मतलब क्या है? ये पहला सवाल है.
Right. Quran is a word derived from the three-lettered Arabic word qara'a. Qara'a or qira'at is the infinitive. Qira'at means to read, to recite. So qara'a can also be applied to verbal recitation, but essentially the basic root meaning is to read something like we read a paper, like this paper is before me when I read from this. That is why when the revelation began for the first time in Islam, when the angel Jibreel appeared to Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam for the first time and revealed the very first verse of the Holy Quran, it caused a little confusion in the mind of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallam. It said Iqra. Iqra means read, which means both reading verbally and to read from paper. And because Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallam was not, did not know how to read and write, was an unlettered person, so he said, I don't know how to read. Innocently, that was his response. Then he repeated it and said, I don't know how to read. Then he clenched him, held him tightly in his arms. It was an apparition, of course. Jibreel has no such form, human form. He appears in some different forms to different people. So that apparition of Jibreel is known to have embraced him strongly and said, read, Iqra. Then he understood what he meant and he said, Iqra, exactly as was said. The first word of revelation which he read was Iqra itself, which means read. And from then on, it all started until the end of the completion of the Quran. Quran is derived from that. The word Quran means a thing which is widely read or which is most read. Most read in the sense of all the readable material, the book which is read by most people would be called Al-Quran, or widely read also. So all the superlatives related to the reading are contained in the word Al-Quran. Right? Next, please.
This is from Talat Mazhar. Second question is in Urdu. And she says, जबकि कुरान मजीद को कुरान हकीम भी कहा है, यानी हिकमत की किताब और मुकम्मल ज़ाब्ता हयात, कुरान और हदीस बुखारी शरीफ के हवाला से ये मालूम करना चाहती हूँ मेहदी के ज़हूर की वाज़े निशानियाँ कुरान हकीम के किन या हदीस बुखारी शरीफ में कहाँ से नज़रसानी कर सकती हूँ?
कहाँ से
कर सकती हूँ?
नज़रसानी? नज़र क्या मतलब?
कहाँ से पढ़ सकती हूँ?
अच्छा।
कुरान हकीम से या हदीस बुखारी शरीफ से?
But you said the question was in Urdu. This is no Urdu. कहाँ से मैं नज़रसानी कर सकती हूँ? But I mean, this is a small mistake anyway. I understand what she means. The lady means that how can I reach those verses of the Holy Quran or the traditions of the Holy Prophet? Where are they mentioned? So that I could satisfy myself as to the Quran mentioning the possibility of the appearance of Imam Mahdi and the Hadith supporting this view. Is this the question in a nutshell? Right. You see, it's a question which requires a longish answer, but I'll try to be very brief. The one place in the Holy Quran which very categorically and clearly mentions not only the possibility of a future divine representation, but a definite news that it would certainly happen, is in Surah Al-Jumu'ah. In the beginning of Surah Al-Jumu'ah, Allah tells us of the first advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And having spoken of that and finished the subject, suddenly it turns to the advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallam in another time. And the verse I have in mind, that part of the verse is وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. That Allah again is the same who is capable, who is powerful to raise him, Muhammad Rasulullah. Ba'asa fil ummiyina Rasulan means he raised Muhammad Rasulullah among the unlettered people of Arabia. Now this part of the verse, second verse following it is وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ. He would raise him in other people. Akhareen means who are not the same. among a different people. And وَآخِرِهِمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ, and who have not met, they have no contact with each other. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. And in this regard, you should remember that God is most dignified and powerful, Aziz. And Al-Hakim is also all-wise. So if he wants to do something, he does it with dignity, and with power he is capable of doing it, and also with wisdom. Then the second verse says, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ. To appoint Muhammad Rasulullah or his representative once again is a special favor of Allah, which may be bestowed on anyone. This part of the verse makes it absolutely clear that it is not the second advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah himself which is being discussed. It is the advent of somebody representing him which is being discussed. Because if he were to come again, then Allah would not say, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. He was known to have received this blessing of Allah, so no new person was to be bestowed with this blessing again. This verse indicates that God knows where and how to bestow his favor, and on whomsoever he pleases. No man can decide this. Now this is the verse of the Quran which speaks of the advent of Hazrat Muhammad apparently at a different time, at a remote period of time from the time of Hazrat Muhammad. The people among whom he was to appear are mentioned as having no relationship whatsoever with the people of Arabia among whom he first appeared. Now this verse, or these verses, were revealed to Hazrat Muhammad when he was sitting in company of some of his companions, some Arabs and one non-Arab were all sitting there. When he recited these verses, immediately the question which was addressed to him was, who would be those people? That means everybody understood that because no one else is mentioned, so Hazrat Muhammad would repeat his visit. So they were surprised and said, who would be those people among whom you would appear? Now the answer to that question clarifies everything and answers every question which should have been asked. He put his hand on the shoulder of Salman Farsi, the only non-Arab sitting there in company of the Arabs, and said, لَوْ كَانَ الْإِيمَانُ إِنْ the Thuraya لَنَالَهُ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ هَؤُلَاءِ. If the faith deserted earth and was elevated to Pleiades, that constellation of stars, very special, everybody perhaps knows what Pleiades is in English. We know in Urdu it is called Suraya. So the Holy Prophet said, if Iman, that is faith, deserted the earth so completely that it was removed to the Pleiades, a man from among these people, from among them, would bring the faith back to earth. And this is the meaning of وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ. Now, incidentally, he answered, in fact, many questions. Number one, why was there any need for anybody to come? And the answer to this was, Iman, faith, can desert you despite the book being there, despite the traditions being there, because the books and the traditions are no guarantee for the safety and security of the faith within the hearts. Books remain and people go astray. So he said this is the reason why there should be some other divine visitation during that period. The second question which should have been asked, why should it happen? You have just come. And when should it happen? The answer was it would happen at a very remote and distant point. Until it can be described that the faith had almost deserted the earth. It would not happen before that. So he was talking of a time far removed from his own age. Then the question could have been asked as to, will you come again or will it be someone else? The answer to that was that he put his hand on the shoulder of a non-Arab. And that also answered other questions. It said, when he said he will be from him, from his people, it meant that number one, he was not be an Arab, and then he was not be from my progeny because he was a non-Arab, and non-Arabs could not be called progeny of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he was be a non-Arab person anyway. So this explains the meaning of Zalika Fadlullah Yutihi Man Yasha. This is Allah's grace. He is free to grant this grace to anyone he likes. Nobody can force his hand. So this is the verse, this is the tradition which the lady required from me to point out so she can study herself. And this tradition is taken from the most authentic book of traditions, that is Bukhari. The verse is from the Surah Jummah in the beginning, and from Kitab al-Bukhari she can find the hadith so easily, speaking of latter days, etc. Acha. I am reminded by the private secretary that we have some other engagements and the time is about over. So have you finished your list of questions or?
There's just one last one.
Okay, please, I'll answer that and then I'll take leave. Yes.
This lady says, हुजूर जो लोग आपसे अक्सर मुलाकात करते हैं, आपको अच्छा लगता है या नहीं?
Very. How can I describe this question? You say it all depends on those who visit me. If उनको अच्छा लगता है, then मुझे भी अच्छा लगता है. If they like it, then I also like it. And of course, they visit me because they like it. There is no compulsion. So I'm always responsive to the extended hand of love and friendship, and I always try to be more responsive, not just reciprocal, but more than what is offered. So that is, in fact, a source of spiritual energy which is keeping me going, right? But I have limitations. It is a limitation of time which sometimes to request. This time no more, because there are others who will be deprived. Not that I don't like their repeated visits, because these repeated visits would families, particularly, small children, they all come to me, have a feeling of a very large universal family. From Africa, Thailand, difference. Parts and parcels of the same atmosphere of universal brotherhood. It's a very important institution, which with the grace of Allah now programming and developing, evolving with the passage of time.
There is a sister here from Dubai.
Yes, one short question with one short answer, right? Okay, come here.
She says, why do the Sunnis not allow the Sunnis to pray with the Sunnis when all the prayers are the same?
You see, as far as their even if the prayers will decline, there is a which we face, we genuinely believe, and we genuinely that Imam Mahdi to through Allah. Appointed by and so many. There is another Muslim and is calling them are being called appoints an imam. This is Mujaddidin was not stopped. It was stopped for a while. You know, movement of the whole. And you always, when you look back, you see the text. Almost why the message gives to us was will be appointed by